Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
So before I jump into today's class with verse 68, I just wanted to really quickly say something, which is that this bhajan that we sang now before class, it's a really wonderful bhajan. It was composed by one of our great acharyas, Srila Narottam Das Thakur, and because this class is the Caitanya Caritamrita class, which is from this book, so this book is all about Lord Chaitanya and his associates, and there is Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda on the altar, the first altar. So this bhajan is basically begging for mercy from Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda and Advaita Acharya, the whole Panchatattva, the whole main associates of Lord Chaitanya. So it is nice to ask for their mercy before speaking about them. So if you have a minute today, do read the translation, the explanation of this bhajan. It's really wonderful. Okay, so please repeat after me. Text 68. Shri Jaila Jiaila Tanre Namanila.
Shri Jai
Kirtagna Haila Tanre Skanda Kruda Haila.
Kirtagna Haila Tanre Skanda Kruda Haila.
Shri Jaila Jiaila Tanre Namanila.
Shri Jaila Jiaila Tanre Namanila.
Kirtagna Haila Tanre Skanda Kruda Haila.
Kirtagna Haila Tanre Skanda Kruda Haila.
Shri Jaila Jiaila Tanre Namanila.
Shri Jaila Jiaila Tanre Namanila.
Kirtagna Haila Tanre Skanda Kruda Haila.
Kirtagna Haila Tanre Skanda Kruda Haila.
Shri Jaila fructified. Jiaila maintained. Tanre him. Na not. Manila accepted. Kirtagna ungrateful. Haila thus became. Tanre to them. Skanda trunk. Kruda angry. Haila became. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Some branches did not accept the original trunk that vitalized and maintained the entire tree. When they thus became ungrateful, the original trunk was angry at them. So to put things into context, this chapter of the Caitanya Caritamrita, chapter 12, is titled The Expansions of Advaita Acharya and Gadadhar Pandit. So this chapter is talking about this chapter is talking about the followers of Advaita Acharya and Gadadhar Pandit, naming them by name and saying who is doing what service. And this is describing how the cult of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this movement that Lord Chaitanya started, was spreading. So, in this particular, how it is described as the Chaitanya tree. So this verse is talking about the original trunk and branches. So this is referring to the Chaitanya tree, of which Lord Chaitanya, he is the trunk of the tree, and he is also the gardener. And of this tree, there are two main branches, Lord Nityananda and Advaita Acharya. And then from these branches, all the other sub-branches and other branches are coming. So it is described that so it's really wonderful. There are lots of pictures actually about this as well. So if you have a minute again, look at the Caitanya tree. If you just Google the Caitanya tree, you'll see pictures with names and of the branches and things like that. So this verse is saying that some of the branches, they did not accept the original trunk. So who is this original trunk? It's Lord Caitanya. He is the main trunk. So some of the branches coming from the same tree actually did not accept Lord Caitanya and what Lord Caitanya was teaching. So because of this, because they became ungrateful, the original trunk, that is Lord Caitanya, was angry at them. So this is a really good analogy, because you see a tree, we are all familiar with trees, and if one of the branches is cut off for whatever reason, that branch shrivels up and dies, right? Like, you can't maintain a branch on its own that's not connected to the tree. So in the same way, basically, when Lord Chaitanya's mercy stopped flowing to these branches, namely these people, basically shriveled off, which is described in the next verse. So the next verse is text 69. Krudahana skandatare jalana sanchare jalabhave krisha sakha sukhaya amare. Thus, Lord Chaitanya did not sprinkle upon them the water of his mercy, and they gradually withered and died. So, who has done science? Yes, biology. Who's done biology in school? Right? Some of us have done biology. So, one of the biology, just thinking back to high school, was one of the modules was the plant and how there's different systems in the plant that carries water and food to the leaves and the fruits. So the xylem and the phloem, like those are tubes in the trunk of the tree which carry food and water to the leaves and the fruits. So there's like a transportation of water from the roots all the way up to the branches. So just like that, this example again is really very appropriate as to how, so we can actually understand how things are flowing, how the mercy is flowing. The mercy is flowing like water. In fact, it is said, Lord Chaitanya did not sprinkle upon them the water of his mercy. So these branches, the water supply was cut off. Lord Chaitanya's mercy was cut off. And they gradually withered and died. So, something really important that we should consider coming from these two verses is that, just like right now we sang the bhajan, right, and I did say please read the translation of it. So one thing in the translation is that Lord Chaitanya, so the singer Narottam Das Thakur, he's saying, Lord Chaitanya, you are the most merciful, please give me your mercy. You have come to deliver all the fallen souls in this age, but I am the most fallen, so please think of me first. So then this same merciful Lord Chaitanya, he is so merciful, but why is he then taking away his mercy from the branches of his very own tree? Would anyone like to comment? Would anybody like to give an answer as to why that might be the case? The question is that Lord Chaitanya is the most merciful. And then here we are reading though that he took away his mercy from some of the branches. So why do you think he did that? Yes, Prabhu? Yes. Yes. So that, the answer that Prabhu gave is they deviated from his teachings. So that is really, really important. So it's not that you can do or we can do whatever nonsense and still get the mercy. It's a process, it's a procedure that Lord Chaitanya has given. And the procedure is really simple. And Prabhupada uses the word sublime, very sublime, which means like extremely satisfying. And this process is basically chanting chanting the holy names of the Lord, which is bhakti, which is the most important. So chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, which is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And following the 4 regulative principles on a daily basis. So the 4 regulative principles, as we are familiar with, are no meat, fish or eggs, no alcohol, tea or coffee, no gambling, and no illicit sex. These are the basic things. So basically, if you think of it, there's 5 things. Chant every day, follow the 4 regulative principles. You will be protected, you will be following the process. Lord Chaitanya's mercy will be coming. So what we should remember is Lord Chaitanya was starting a revolution, a whole movement. He was starting this to teach us. He came as an example to teach us how to do devotional service, how to do bhakti, so that we can then go back to Godhead. This was Lord Chaitanya's whole aim. So when someone is starting something and there is somebody else saying the opposite thing or something that is not quite fitting in, then it's really important right in the beginning to nip it in the bud, which means to just completely get rid of it so that there is no false philosophy and no false teachings that go forth, so that the teachings that Lord Chaitanya is trying to convey are pure and transmigrates through all the way down, descends all the way down. So this is why Lord Chaitanya, he didn't give his mercy to the deviants, to the people who weren't following exactly what he was saying. And in fact, he taught by example how we should avoid people who are offenders or who've got the wrong philosophy. He spoke very strongly against the Mayavadis, who are the impersonalists, and very strongly condemned the Mayavadi philosophy, and in fact went as far as to say that anybody who absorbs the Mayavadi philosophy, they are doomed. Their spiritual lives are doomed. So we have to be really trying to understand the mood of Lord Chaitanya, and also the practical point for our lives are that we won't, even though Lord Chaitanya is the most merciful and he has come in Kali Yuga to deliver the fallen conditioned souls, and Kali Yuga is the most degraded age as we know, even though he is so merciful, still he will take away his mercy if we are not following the process he gave. So then what do? We go to Lord Nityananda. Lord Nityananda is extremely merciful, and Lord Nityananda's glories are really marvelous. Lord Nityananda, he delivers the most fallen, and if we are trying to purify ourselves and try to get onto the path of following strictly, we beg Lord Nityananda for mercy. We beg him for strength, for spiritual strength. Because remember, Lord Nityananda is Adi Guru, he is Balaram. So from him comes all spiritual strength. So we ask him for the strength so that we can follow the teachings. We can follow the 4 principles so that we can chant nicely our 16 rounds or whichever number of rounds we are doing, and so that we can gradually get the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. So one really important point is we can't get the mercy of Lord Chaitanya without the mercy of Lord Nityananda. This is really important to understand. And in Lord Nityananda's glories, it is described that one who doesn't know Lord Nityananda, one who hasn't used his life to get to know Lord Nityananda, that life is wasted. So we really need to get to know Lord Nityananda as well. Okay, moving on to text 70, the last text for today, which is Chaitanya Rahita Deha Shushka Ashta Sama Jivete Mritasai Maile Dande Yama. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. A person without Krishna consciousness is no better than dry wood or a dead body. He is understood to be dead while living, and after death he is punishable by Yamaraj. So this text has a purport. So before I get into the purport, please repeat this verse after me. A person without Krishna consciousness is no better than dry wood or a dead body. He is understood to be dead while living. And after death, he is punishable by Yamaraj. So the purport is that in the Bhagavatam 6.3.29, Canto 6, 3rd chapter, 29th verse of the Bhagavatam, Yamaraj, the superintendent of death, he tells his assistants what class of man they should bring before him. There he states, a person whose tongue never describes the qualities and holy name of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose heart never throbs as he remembers Krishna and his lotus feet, and whose head never bows in obeisances to the Supreme Lord, must be brought before me for punishment. In other words, non-devotees are brought before Yamaraj for punishment, and thus material nature awards them various types of bodies. After death, which is Dehantra, a change of body, non-devotees are brought before Yamaraj for justice. By the judgment of Yamaraj, material nature gives them bodies suitable for the resultant actions of their past activities. This is the process of Dehantra, or transmigration of the self from one body to another. Krishna conscious devotees, however, are not subject to be judged by Yamaraj. For devotees there is an open road, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. After giving up the body, Tyaktva Deham, a devotee never again has to accept another material body. For in a spiritual body he goes back home, back to Godhead. The punishments of Yamaraj are meant for persons who are not Krishna conscious. So there is a little hiatus, a little detour we are taking in this verse, and Prabhupada is explaining that who actually goes back to Godhead and who doesn't. So Yamaraj is the god of death and the god of justice, and he is very feared by people who death is to be feared by people who are not following. And it's described that death comes like a roaring lion and takes one away, despite the person not wanting to live. We, as practicing devotees, should try to be ready for death, should actually try to welcome death when it comes as just a change of body to move on to the spiritual world. So this is what the consciousness needs to be like at the time of death, instead of being fearful of it. So if you ever wondered what kind of people go to Yamaraj, how you can avoid going to Yamaraj, because in the scriptures the Yamadutas are also described, and if you don't know, the Yamadutas are pretty scary looking. They're described as having reddish hair, bow-like tusks, claws, and they come with ropes, they come with the hounds of hell, they come with their dogs, the Yamadutas, to sniff out the souls who they're going to take with them. So this whole chapter is describing Yamadutas, and so it's pretty scary. And for people who are not following the process, this fear is going to be there. In fact, quite a few end-of-life experiences describe that the person who's leaving their body, they kind of say, let me go, and they thrash around, So this is basically the Yamadutas coming to take them away. And how we can avoid this? So this is what Yamaraj is saying to his servants, the Yamadutas. He's saying, bring me these sorts of people. Bring me the people whose tongue never describes the qualities and holy names of Krishna. So who never talk about Krishna, who never say the holy name with their tongues, whose hearts don't throb as they remember Krishna and his lotus feet. So this is a really important point. The heart is where bhakti is. And the heart needs to throb. Who's been in love with somebody? You know, when you're in love, when you see that person or you think about that person, the heart gives an extra beat. So like that, when we think about Krishna and Radharani and the spiritual personalities, our heart actually needs to feel that. We need to feel something. This is called bhava. And it is by this flow of bhava, this flow of emotions, that Krishna is happy. Krishna is Rasaraj. Rasa means like the mellows. So he is all about emotions. And he doesn't need our offerings or our service or things like that. What he needs is our love. He actually doesn't even need it, but he wants that. He wants our love. So if we have this love for Krishna, this bhava, this emotion for Krishna, if we put that true emotion, genuine emotion in our service, and in everything that we do, in all our services, all our words, all our actions for Krishna, that is what Krishna takes. He doesn't take the practical action, he takes the love, he takes the emotions. So he is the king of emotions, Rasaraj. Right? So the heart needs to throb. So if our hearts aren't throbbing like that, when we're remembering Krishna and his lotus feet, we kind of qualify to be taken by the Yamadutas. But there are some other points there, so let's try to qualify ourselves to get to that point where our hearts throb. The other people who go to Yamalok are people whose head never bows down, obeisances to the Supreme Lord. So that's easy, we can do that. When we come to the temple, we bow down to Prabhupada, get Prabhupada's blessings, and we bow down to the deities, right? We can do that. So hopefully if we're doing that, even if our hearts aren't throbbing just yet, we still can, stay out of hell. So, so these people need to be brought before me for punishment. So people who don't bow down with their heads to the Supreme Lord, whose hearts don't throb, and whose tongue never describes the glories and the qualities of the holy name. So these people, bring them to me for punishment, says Yamaraj. So, in other words, non-devotees. So somebody who does these things, who chants with emotion, who does devotional service with emotion, genuine emotion, who is bowing down before the Lord, and who is describing the qualities and the holy name, that these people, they are devotees, and the rest are non-devotees. So to call ourselves devotees, we should be doing these things. Chanting, doing devotional service, right? Devotional service is simple, so simple. It is basically chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. That is the main service for this age. So all we need to do is chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra as much as possible. So for devotees who have taken a vow, it is 16 rounds a day, and for those who haven't, it is any number of rounds a day. The one rule of thumb is if you started chanting 1 round a day, don't stop doing that. It's the first step. Then you take another step, which can be 2 rounds a day. So sort of don't go back from what you started doing. Then you can make progress. Then you can go higher and higher. So devotional service starts from hearing and chanting. So it's the easiest thing to do in Kali Yuga is just hear and chant, and Lord Caitanya taught this method. So for people who don't follow these things, then what happens is after death, the Yamadutas drag them to Yamaraj. The soul goes to Yamaraj and the subtle body. And then what happens is material nature, Mahamaya, Durga, gives this soul a new body according to their past karma in their life. So in the Bhagavad Gita, in the middle of the Bhagavad Gita, there are some pictures, and those pictures show that if somebody has been, say a very voracious meat eater, they become a tiger or a bear, or a meat-eating animal. If somebody has been, spending their lives quite sort of engaged in prostitution or illicit affairs, they become trees. So, and then actually the hellish planets and the punishments for each, they're described in Canto 5 of the Bhagavatam. And there are so many different kinds of hells and the punishments that can be given. So we try to not go there at all. Who wants to suffer so much? and the suffering is pretty intense and it goes on for a long time. So after death, Durga Devi, material nature, gives this soul a new body according to their activities. So which is why the activities need to be good in this life, need to be not just good but spiritual. They therefore will never go to hell if we do that. So then by the judgment of Yamraj makes the decision after taking into account all the good deeds, the bad deeds. He is the God of justice. He does that. Then Durga Devi gives a new body suitable for which is suiting their past activities. This is the process of Dehantra, or transmigration of the soul from one body to another, which is the self. The soul is the self. We are the soul. We aren't these bodies. So Krishna conscious devotees are not subject to be judged by Yamraj. For devotees there is an open road, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. After giving up the body, so after the end, after this body is no more, after we leave this body, after we die, a devotee who has been practicing never has to accept another material body, which means they don't have to come back to this material world in these material bodies, be it an animal or a human or a tree, not a material body, but instead gets a spiritual body and goes back home, back to Godhead. The punishments of Yamraj are meant for persons who are not Krishna conscious. Okay, so this purport is referring to the Bhagavad Gita, is referring to chapter 4 verse 9 of the Bhagavad Gita. The words that are used from that verse here are Dehantara, which is changing bodies, and also Tyaktva Deham, giving up the body. So this is the verse. I'll read it really quickly. It's a really beautiful verse. Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tatvataha tyaktva deham punar janma naiti mameti so Arjuna. So this is Krishna and he is speaking to Arjuna. And what he is saying should be very, very hopeful to all of us, because Krishna is telling Arjuna, he's saying that one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. Right? So that makes sense. Krishna is saying to Arjuna, people who know the transcendental nature. Transcendental means above the three modes of material nature. So the three modes of material nature are the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of ignorance. So above these modes means transcendental. So what it is meaning to say is that Krishna's appearance, Krishna coming into this world, Krishna leaving this world, Krishna's activities while he is in this world, everything that Krishna did while he was here, in the battle of Kurukshetra, in Vrindavan as a child, in Dwarka as the king, all these things that Krishna did, they are all transcendental. They are happening because of his will, because he wants it to happen. They're not happening because material nature is dictating. Whereas for everybody else, for the rest of us, it is happening because of material nature. We are bound by the modes. We can become transcendental by following the process that Lord Chaitanya has given, which is simple, chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and following the four regulative principles. Then our bodies, even though we remain in these bodies, it becomes like a transcendental vessel. It's described like, there's a fire, it's burning, and this fire is transcendence. And if you put a metal rod in the transcendental fire, eventually that metal rod becomes hot and acts exactly like fire. So this material body is that metal rod. And what we need to do with this metal rod is make it transcendental. And how we do that is basically by trying to follow. And by following, we become more and more spiritualized, more and more transcendental. So even within this body, we can actually enjoy transcendental bliss. But this particular verse, what it is saying is, somebody who knows that Krishna's birth, activities and appearance, they are all transcendental, not trapped up in material nature, that person, upon leaving this body, upon dying, he does not have to come back to the material world, but he goes to the spiritual world. So isn't that so wonderful? That is a portal. That is one of the doors that Krishna has kept open for us. That, and Prabhupada describes in this purport that it is he goes back home, back to Godhead, and also that there is an open road. So the road is totally open. We don't have to worry that we'll go to Yamaraj or we'll be suffering in hell for eternity or a long time at least, if we are doing the processes. And like I said, it's simple, pretty much just 5 things. Chant every day, 16 rounds if you are initiated. Chant with feeling, chant genuinely, chant avoiding the 10 offenses against chanting, and then follow the 4 regulative principles. And then also, there are other little rules and regulations, but mainly just these things. And just by doing these things, having prasadam every day, all these things, they are going to make us more and more spiritualized. And so throughout the scriptures, there are various portals given, various openings given, like these various doorways, that this is how you can come back home, this is how you can come back home. So when people generally want to go back home, because home is where everything is just perfect. They feel belong, they have something meaningful to do, and the spiritual world is amazing. It's very, very blissful. And we belong in the spiritual world, which is why we are unhappy in the material world. And no matter how much we try to adjust, we are like fish out of water. So we actually need to try to go back home. And there are, through the scriptures, all these doorways given to us, how to come back, how to come back. So this is one such doorway, which is describing that if you know that Krishna's appearance and his activities are transcendental, then immediately after quitting this present material body, you can go back to Godhead. The devotee, simply by understanding the transcendental nature of the body and activities of the Lord, attains the abode of the Lord after ending this body, and does not run the risk of returning to this material world. So that's pretty far out, isn't it? Just by understanding, it's so merciful. Krishna is so merciful. He's giving us all these wonderful, wonderful opportunities. So this human life is meant to go back, to make use of this opportunity that we have in this vessel. This human life is a vessel. It's got this special feature of superior intelligence, which the other forms of life don't have. So this feature of intelligence is what we are trying to utilize now in understanding the words of the Lord and in trying to follow the processes. So we really need to use our intelligence to keep ourselves on track, to follow the spiritual process. So text 9, chapter 4, text 9, it's got a big explanation there, but basically the essence is that somebody who is following, somebody who is understanding Krishna's birth and activities are transcendental, that they can go back to Godhead immediately after leaving this body. And people who might be very important in the material world, like scholars who know a lot of things but don't have that heart throbbing, don't have that devotional ecstatic emotions, these people, even though they're knowledgeable, they can't go back to Godhead. They need to become devotees first. And what they have to wait for is the mercy of other devotees to then turn them into devotees. So that's how the process works. So the last line of that purport is, one should therefore cultivate Krishna consciousness with faith and knowledge, and in this way attain perfection. So this word cultivate, we are talking about the Caitanya tree and water and gardening. So cultivate, the whole process of bhakti is linked closely to gardening as an analogy, that the bhakti seed is there, The seed of bhakti, where does that seed come from? It comes not from Krishna, it comes from the heart of a devotee. So only a devotee who has bhakti can give bhakti. So that seed is there then. Once somebody gets that seed, then it has to be nurtured with faith and determination. And so there's the whole process, there are 9 steps going up all the way to Krishna Prema. So there needs to be the right association, hearing and chanting, which is watering the plant, and then pulling out all the weeds, which is removing all the offenses, removing all the unnecessary dirty things from the heart, pulling out all these weeds. And then the bhakti lata, this vine, this devotional kripa vine, grows, with all the right things, with all the chanting, all the hearing, all the association, and then goes all the way back to the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna. So this is the process of bhakti, and how you start it is by hearing and chanting. How you maintain it is by hearing and chanting, and in the end there is also hearing and chanting, and that absorption takes us back to Krishna, back to home. Okay, I will stop here, and if anyone would like to add anything or clarify anything, or if they have a question, please you can speak now. So one thing I actually thought of saying, and it's coming back now, is that how I was describing hell and the Yamadutas and the hounds of hell, and how there's so much suffering in hell. So yes, we should be fearful of that. Yes. However, the fear shouldn't be our motivating factor in doing devotional service. The motivating factor in devotional service should be transcendental loving emotions. It should be the love. It should be that we want to do it, not because we are afraid, but because we want to do it for Krishna. We want to do it out of love. So it should be love that is the motivator, not fear. Okay.
Yes, half answer my question really.
Oh.
This fear-driven religion,
Yeah.
fear of hell, it's quite common. Yeah. And we have specific descriptions. You mentioned the hounds of hell and these ugly creatures with claws and that. The reason I'm asking you this question I'm about to ask is you're a medical practitioner. There's an international term in the medical world called terminal restlessness.
Yes.
It's quite well known. And where they've documented people going experiencing these symptoms at the time of death. They say things like, get these dogs away from me, or they're scared of these ugly creatures. So have you experienced, or do you know much about this terminal restlessness that's experienced worldwide?
Yes. Yes, Prabhu, thank you for that very deep question. So yes, there is this term called terminal restlessness, and if you Google it, you'll come across it as well. It is described in the medical textbooks. For those who don't know, I work as a medical doctor, and yes, I do palliate a lot of patients in our hospice and the nursing homes, and I do watch a lot of people going through the dying process, the terminal stage, and I was there helping my father leave his body for 6 intense weeks as well, and have read descriptions of other devotees leaving their bodies and other devotees nursing their dying parents or dying relatives. So this terminal restlessness is definitely something, and what it is terminal means the end, towards the end, and restlessness, there's a lot of agitation, there's a lot of restlessness, there's thrashing around, there is screaming, yelling out. People scream out things like, get these dogs off me, untie the rope, go away, things like that. And for people who don't know, they think it is just confusion, but for people who know, what it is Yamadutas and the hounds of hell coming to take away this soul who is not yet qualified to go back to Godhead. how to overcome this is the main thing, because there are lots of religions which are fear driven, and they say, they focus on not going to hell, and you go to hell, there'll be fire and brimstone, you'll be burning for eternity, all those things, but it's actually not eternity that you go to hell for. It's a very long time, and it's an equal punishment to whatever sins are being washed off. Although it seems like eternity, it seems like time never ends in hell. And the way to stop going to hell is, like I said, become a devotee. How do you become a devotee? By offering obeisances to Krishna, by describing Krishna, by worshipping him, by chanting, all these things. So yes, this terminal restlessness, a lot of people just not aware of it, and we don't really understand until we go through it ourselves. Like, okay, so as a doctor, like, I've seen so many people pass away, and when it came time for my father to pass away, he gave me the greatest gift. By his passing away, I got a glimpse of the spiritual world, and a lot of devotees describe this. When they've helped a relative pass, it's such a high, and then after that, gradually over the next 2 weeks or so, you kind of come back to earth. Basically the windows of the spiritual world open to come and take this soul back as a devotee, and it's really, really wonderful how it happens, how it all happens in a stepwise, and you really see the mercy coming through, and how the spiritual windows actually open. And so for a devotee, leaving their body is actually the opposite of terminal restlessness. It is like terminal peacefulness and terminal happiness. It's like take me back, quickly take me back. One devotee, he wrote, I can't remember his name now, but he wrote his homage to Srila Prabhupada in this year's Vyasa Puja book, and he described his wife leaving her body, and he basically said that when she was unconscious for maybe 2 days or so, and then right on the day she was dying, she opened her eyes and she said, "Oh Radharani, hey Radhe," and then after that she left her body. And so you can see that Radharani was helping her. And then another devotee, and this was in Sydney, they left their body, and their relatives described that she was seeing Tulsi Devi. She was seeing Vrinda Devi, and Vrinda Devi was there in all her glory, and this devotee, this old lady who was leaving her body, she was saying, "Oh wow, she's so beautiful, she's so amazing," things like that, and like had this ecstatic smile on her face. So this is how devotees leave their body. And since I was talking about my father, so the way he left through his mouth, like his soul left through his mouth, and he was still unconscious, but he had chanting going on the whole time, and he left his body at the Abhijit period, which is the period of the day which is very, very auspicious, and also all the events that happened before that were astounding. So again, there was the mercy of Radharani immensely, and there was the mercy of Bhakti Devi. So all these things, for a devotee, leaving the body is actually what we are here for. That's our finale, that's our the headliner. That's the main concert, basically, how we leave the body. So for a devotee, it is described that it's how you leave the body is going to actually tell everyone what kind of devotee you were, what kind of devotee you are. So we see devotees dying in Vrindavan all of a sudden, or having very glorious departures. So basically for a devotee, the aim is a glorious departure. That's our goal. Die gloriously. Die so that you make it back to Godhead. Actually, Padmalochan is just walking by, and looking at him, what I'm remembering is he always says, taking off like a jet plane. You know, like when he's wishing somebody happy birthday, he says, oh yeah, you're taking off like a jet plane. So that's what our lives are meant to be. Like we are, this whole life is like cruising the runway, and then death is taking off. You know, to fit into the material world, like there's some things that fit in, but some things that don't fit into the material understanding. But for Krishna, his appearance, so we don't call it birth, we call it appearance, because he wasn't born and he doesn't die. He appears and he disappears. He never dies. It's all transcendental in that it's not mundane. It's the opposite of what we go through as human beings. It's on a completely different plane, on the spiritual plane that it happens. So even though it happens in Devi Dham, it happens in this material world, it is not material. It's transcendental. It's above the material rules and regulations. We have to follow the material's rule and regulations. Like we can't drive a car on an empty tank, you know, so we have to fill it up. But for Krishna, he could drive a car on an empty tank, you know, by spiritual energy. So the same rules don't apply to him, basically. So the reason for this is so that we don't become offensive. We don't start, like, you know, one pastime of Krishna is dancing with the gopis at night time. So many girlfriends at night, and these girlfriends had run away from their families, you know, and their children and their husbands. And like if you look at it materially, it's atrocious if you look at it from the material point of view. But if you look at it from the spiritual point of view, it's beautiful. So it's, you know, the same. So we can't judge Krishna and his activities by our material rules and understanding, basically. So to understand his activities, we should be reading the Krishna book, because that's where all his activities are described really nicely, and other books, but Krishna book in particular. And also we should be seeking clarification, like if you have a senior devotee who you could read under, like, you know, just sort of read together, and then that devotee could explain, or you could read on your own and go and ask, you know. So that's going to give the right understanding in the right mood, because remember, it's all about mood, all about bhava, the emotion, the right emotion, yeah, without being offensive. Okay, thank you very much for that question. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Caitanya Caritamrita ki jai.